Welcome to Inside the Coaching Mind, conversations on leadership, coaching, and team building. Our host, Terry Pettit, led the University of Nebraska Cornhusker volleyball team from 1977 to 1999 and coached Nebraska's first ever national championship in 1995. And today, Coach Pettit mentors coaches, authors books, and presents to corporations and businesses on leadership and team building. And I'm Dave Young, producer of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. Terry, we've got a bit of a departure from just our strict audio podcast in this particular episode.
Yeah, today we're gonna do two things: the regular audio podcast, but we're launching a Zoom podcast as well that will allow people to go on and see three remarkable young women talk about the setting position. I'm excited about it. I think it's absolutely one of the best things we've ever done, and perhaps the best discussion I've seen about setting.
I'm excited for people to see this and to give us their feedback. Of course, you'll be able to listen to this on your whatever your podcast player of choice is. And I just wanted to throw in a mention, too, of a couple of ways that you can help support Inside the Coaching Mind. I mean, the podcast is free. You're welcome to listen to it, watch the video now. But it's not free to produce. It takes time. It takes a bit of effort and coordination, and you can support it in a number of ways. Go to terrypettit.com and buy one of Coach Pettit's books.
As you know, Amazon, Tesla, and Apple are no longer with us as sponsors. So we have several ways you can support us. Talent and the Secret Life of Teams. It's an exceptional book, I think. And the other one is A Fresh Season. It's really lessons on leadership and volleyball. And if you go to the website, terrypettit.com, you can purchase one of those. I do want to thank the the athletic director club in Lincoln, Nebraska. They purchased 44 books signed, and there are discounts if you order that many. We want to keep doing this, but we can if we either receive some financial support or people purchase books.
So if you just want us to keep going with this, we've also put a donate button on the site. So it's like a collection plate. Give whatever you can, whatever you care to. And we've never done anything like that before, but I think it's going to be interesting to see if people are willing to support it that way. Anything you want to add before we get started in this conversation, Terry?
No, I don't think so. I do get messages and emails from people that really appreciate what we're doing, and I'm excited. Let's get to the show.
All right. Here's Inside the Coaching Mind with three setters.
Hello, this is Terry Pettit, the host of Inside the Coaching Mind, and we're really lucky today to have three remarkable women who happen to play the setter position. Lori Endicott, Vandersnick. Lori, you played in, I guess you graduated in 1988. You spent 2 years as a right side player, 2 years as an All-American setter, went on and played in 2 quadrennials for the U.S. Olympic team, and in 1982 at the Barcelona Olympics, you were named the
That'd
best.
be 92.
92.
Coach Pettit.
You were named the best setter in the world. Kelly Hunter, your mom set on the first team at Nebraska to win the regional championship. Did you know that before I sent that to you in an email?
No, I actually didn't. So that's actually really cool. But the only stories my mom ever told me about was how she would win sprints every day and how my dad was like one of the only people in the gym watching. So those are kind of two funny stories that I always hear.
Yeah. Well, your dad was a very successful baseball player. Your mother's maiden name was Lori Melcher. Kelly, you're the only Nebraska setter to have led 2 teams to national championships, and you're now a volunteer coach at Nebraska. And our third remarkable woman is Christy Johnson, Lynch, who's been the head coach at Iowa State. This must be about your 16th season. Is that correct?
Yep.
And both you and Lori have 2 kids. You were a 2-time All-American at Nebraska and led Nebraska to its first national championship in 1995. And you might think that these are, without a doubt, the 3 most outstanding setters from Nebraska, but that wouldn't be quite true because there's another 9 or 10 women who were All-Americans, and some were National Players of the Year. But I deliberately chose these 3 because they're from different generations. They have different stories to tell, trained by different people. And I think we're going to gain some insight not only into these ladies, but into the setter position as well. Lori, I don't know how you were first introduced to being a setter. When did that happen? I know you were a basketball player in high school. All 3 of you were multi-sport athletes. And I think in your senior year in high school, you also played middle blocker. Is that accurate?
I did. I became a setter and a middle hitter my sophomore year of high school. When I came in as a freshman, there was a very experienced group of young ladies on my team. And so I was a role player for sure, in kind of a minor role my freshman year. And then as a sophomore, the coach decided to make me a middle hitter and a setter. And so that became my role. But really my first love in sport was basketball.
Mm-hmm. And what made that change?
You know, I think it was my sophomore year was the first time I played club volleyball. And I got to see the level of play that was possible playing on a higher level club team and traveling and seeing some different parts of the game that I hadn't seen before. In club, I played right side and set. We ran a 6-2, and so that was a new experience. And that's what really created that love of volleyball for me.
Okay. And prior to coming to Nebraska, who was your mentor at the setter position?
You know, I don't know if I really, like as a freshman, I would say it was Lisa Cummins, who played at SIU and was a very successful setter in college. But when I first got introduced to Nebraska volleyball wasn't until I was a senior in high school. And at that point, it was Kathy Noth. You know, you would watch her play and she's intense and competitive and composed and just provides all around skills. And that just enveloped this kind of this ideal player in my mind. And so that's who I looked to.
And when people ask me, was there one player that changed this program? It is Kathy Noth. She was, I believe, most valuable player in the conference 4 consecutive years. The first 2 as a hitter, and the second 2 as a setter. Christy, I know you were a very successful softball pitcher. Did you play basketball as well?
No, none of the sports that involved running were interesting to me at all. So, mostly softball.
And I'm guessing that Deb Graffenton had a lot to do with your development.
Absolutely. Yeah, Deb was my high school coach for some of my years. She was my club coach. And she introduced me to volleyball. She got me into the sport. She got me playing club. I mean, great coach, and taught me, you know, really just about everything I knew in high school and club. I learned from her.
And when you came to Nebraska, you were by far the most polished setter we had ever recruited, the most finished setter. Your footwork was good. Your consistency was good. And initially, we weren't going to recruit somebody in that year because Nikki Stricker was the year ahead of it. But you were too good. You know, I could not live with the thought that somebody this good from our state might be playing for another team. And so we punted the idea of getting an outside hitter and went with Christy Johnson. And if we hadn't done that, then Kelly Hunter wouldn't be joining us today. Kelly, tell us about when you first decided you were going to be a setter. I know you played basketball. Did you play any other sports?
Yeah, I played basketball and then tennis, but My whole family played volleyball. My mom's sisters all played volleyball. My mom and then my sister as well. So it was kind of like my one true love in sport, but I loved playing a bunch of different stuff, and I would get bored if I just played volleyball all year round. So definitely fell in love with volleyball, but then setting, I kind of knew that I wasn't going to grow much more after about my freshman year. I was 5'10", which isn't super, super tall for college volleyball. So I was actually a hitter as well up until my senior year, and I never really ran a 5-1 system until my senior year, but I kind of just knew if I wanted to play at the next level, it would probably be setting. And so I started that right before my freshman year of high school, just because, like I said, I knew I wasn't going to grow much more. So I had to hang up my hitting days, or my hitting dreams, I guess, pretty early.
And who was your mentor in high school?
Not necessarily for setting specifically, but Gwen Egbert was my coach for high school, club, extra trainings, everything. We were always training with Gwen. So she was amazing, and she definitely knew how to work you and make you disciplined and make you tough. So she was definitely my mentor for all of volleyball and not just setting specifically.
And Gwen has had a dramatic impact on college programs everywhere. She was a several times state championship coach at Papillion La Vista. I believe she's a volunteer coach at Indiana right now, was the head coach at Doane College, and I know Nebraska volleyball owes a lot to her.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned you were 5'10", and Lori and Christy are just below that, but you were all very successful blockers, not necessarily in going out and getting stuff blocks. But I remember Lori hearing Terry Liskavich, the Olympic coach, saying that Lori Endicott's the best blocker on our team. And what he meant by that was your stability, your hand position. Why do you think the three of you were such successful blockers?
I think when you are smaller in stature, you have to be more disciplined with where you're setting up your block, your timing, technique. You have to fine tune all those little parts of blocking. You can't get away with being out of position and still being effective blocking. And so that would be my thought on why a smaller player sometimes has a lot of success in blocking, because you have to be good at those little pieces of the block, those little parts that make a big difference.
You all have very strong hands too, which helps to prevent from being used on the block. Christy, any insights into that?
Yeah, I think there's an alertness that comes along with being a setter, understanding the game situations, so that if a hitter is, maybe starting their approach in a different spot, or, coming inside out, or, there's something situational that you see. I think setters tend to pick up on that just because of the nature of the position. So I think a lot of blocking is about recognizing situations and alertness, paying attention. And I think maybe because we're setters, we get that, pay attention to that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that word, alert. It's one of my most favorite words. Christy, I remember once when we were in the off season and I cut through the rec gym, and you were in there and you'd talk some guy to stand on a box and tossing you balls. And what that meant to me was this person is taking responsibility for her own development. All three of you did. In other words, you weren't just dependent on a coach telling you what to do. I'm not sure that I would want anybody in the setter position who didn't have that potential. It doesn't necessarily mean they had to arrive in college with that, but they had to have a curiosity about the position they played. They had to want to be truly exceptional at it. All three of you have another thing in common. Lori, you became the starting setter at Nebraska in your third year. Kelly, you became the starting setter in your third year. Christy, you became the starting setter in your fourth year. Can you recruit anybody that would be willing to do that today?
I'll say it's very difficult. I think it's harder and harder to talk someone or find athletes that are okay and comfortable with waiting that long. Even if they say they are, they get into it, and I think it's hard to if they don't believe in that delayed gratification idea. I think it's hard to talk them into it. So I certainly think it's possible, but that's almost always in recruiting. That's almost always a question we address pretty quick is, when do I play? When's my chance? When can I kind of count on that opportunity? And those are tough conversations. And if someone has to wait 3 years, 2-3 years, it's often a no, and they move on.
It's hard. And I don't think the average person has any idea how difficult the redshirt year is. You're there helping your team prepare every day. You are competitive people, but it's not being able to get out there when it counts the most. Even though you didn't play until your fourth year, you played 2 years, redshirted a year, and you watched Nikki Stricker. And what did you gain from watching her, from her strengths or her weaknesses? Mm-hmm. What did you learn, Christy?
So much. I mean, I really loved and admired how calm she was. She was just kind of a calm, cool, collected player. And I really learned a lot from her that way. She was really good at setting middle, and I was not when I first started. So I got to watch her do that over and over when we had some pretty great middles. So it's such I feel like setting quick, setting middle is such a nuanced, tough thing, and it takes time and experience to figure that out. So I benefited a lot from learning from her and watching her do it. Right. I think those years that I spent, whether it was on the bench or as a DS, were incredibly valuable. And I don't think I would have been in position to be a starter and to maybe lead a team to a national championship had I not spent those years learning and learning from Nikki, learning the game.
Right. Lori, your second year, you were starting right side player, strong enough player that in the Final Four, you made the all tournament team as a right side player. Was there an advantage to being on the court in another position and then becoming a setter?
I think in any position on the court, there's a level of preparedness. Especially as a role player, right side role player, when you've got people like Karen Dahlgren that's playing, Enid Schoenwise, Tisha Delaney. And so those are key All-Americans that are carrying the load, carrying the pressure of the team. And then I'm a role player. You get to learn the game and experience the game without the full pressure of running the show. And I think those young players coming in that say they want to set for 4 years, I don't think they completely understand that. When you go from high school to the college level, it's a huge step, not just in volleyball, but with school, with life. There's so many other adjustments that athletes have to make. And it's the same kind of step going from college to the national team. But I just don't feel like setters are willing to take that learning phase and take full advantage of, like what Christy was talking about, how she learned so many things just watching with her eyes and just being a part of it. And I think that's really important. But for me, it was just kind of almost like a confidence, a preparedness is really the word I would use in getting me ready to take over as a setter my junior year.
Kelly, you came in and you competed for the position right away. Later, your freshman year, you had an injury, and this is coming from Coach Cook. He said that Kelly really believed that she might have been the better setter. And technically that may be true, but he said to ask you what your perspective is now about that situation.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I started setting a little bit later and then had never really run a 5-1 until my senior year, and was a 4-year high school starter. And then, like Lori just mentioned, that jump from high school to college is so much bigger than anyone really knows. And especially being so successful at the high school level, I kind of just assumed that I would have that same success at the college level. And then kind of hit me right in the face. And I was like, okay, this is a little bit different than I was expecting. And I definitely struggled with some confidence issues, perfectionism, stuff like that, that definitely hindered me a little bit. So kind of similar to what Christy said, having that time where I wasn't really starting, and then I redshirted my sophomore year, which is a pretty interesting situation. But I'm so thankful for that year because, like I just said, I did have some confidence issues, and then being able to redshirt my sophomore year kind of freed up my mind a little bit because I knew it wasn't every rep I'm competing with someone else for a starting spot. It was like, okay, I'm going to take this one rep as it is and just have fun and play volleyball like how I was used to as a high school player. So it was definitely a little bit more of the mental battle for me. And I always loved working out and weightlifting and getting extra reps and stuff like that because I did have Gwen as a coach. So I love that stuff, but definitely struggled a little bit on the mental piece, and then was able to use my second year, my redshirt year, to kind of iron all of that out.
You said something very interesting there, give up perfection.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? I know, Christy, that was an issue for you as well. The idea, I have to be perfect. How, if you're working with a player, how do you get them to the point where we want to be better, we don't want to be perfect? How do you do that? Christy, you got an idea on that?
Well, I'm still working on it, so it's not easy to give up, I think. And I think the odd thing is, perfectionism is something that mostly works for you, meaning, we're so driven, we want to be these high achievers. And so perfectionism isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you're obsessed with it, then it can work against you. So I think for me, learning how to talk to myself, learning to be okay with, mistakes. I think a lot of self-talk so that I don't, I can move on from mistakes. I'm okay with some of that growth, kind of letting go of some of that was a process. And, it's still a big part of me, but I think I learned how to be a little bit nicer to myself over the years in college, especially.
Talk to us about self-talk. What, for somebody who's maybe not familiar with that, how did you learn it, and what were you saying to yourself?
I think I've learned that we're always talking to ourselves. We are always saying something, and it can be good, neutral, or bad. And I don't think I even was aware of it. You just kind of went about training and playing, and I wasn't really even conscious, I think, of what I was saying to myself. And I'm talking the period when I got to college. I started realizing maybe I'm not the best player ever. I've got some work to do. I was on the bench, and I started having self-doubt and wondering if I should be there, if I can do this, if I'm good enough. And so, there was a lot of negative self-talk, but I don't even think I was aware of it until I started, I guess, thinking about it, learning about it, reading, talking to sports psychologists, and becoming more aware of what I was actually saying to myself. And then once you're aware, you can begin to change it. And so then it became, just a work of learning how to replace the negative with the positive self-talk, and just that practice over and over, just like volleyball skill, just like passing or setting or serving. It was a skill I had to learn that took a lot of time and patience and perseverance, but it was something I could really flip from negative self-talk to a lot more positive.
And I think keeping a journal helped you. That was a different form of self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
So a difficult day in practice still became a very interesting journal read and gave you the opportunity to go in and rewrite the story. I remember in the national championship match, you talking about a 31 that you set to Jen McFadden at a critical point, a set that maybe previously you might have been afraid to set.
Mm-hmm.
And you really congratulated yourself for having the courage to do that. I thought journaling was critical. I don't know, Lori or Kelly, did you ever journal? Either one?
No, not really.
Into it, but it never really stuck.
Yeah. What we're talking about here is mindset. And Lori, you probably had the best mindset of any player that I coached. It's why I recruited you. I went to see you at a tryout for a club team in Springfield, Missouri. And keep in mind, Lori was playing middle in high school, and she was being set outside sets. And she literally hit 10 or 11 balls a row in the net. Okay. And she knows I'm there evaluating her, but her posture, her body language, nothing changed. She didn't seem panicked about it. She went back and on the 12th ball, hit the ball well. And this is the absolute truth. I walked out of the gym, went to a payphone, called Terry Lescavich, who is the U.S. Olympic coach. Terry and I had played on the same club team in Chicago under the 68 Olympic coach. And I said, Terry, I have just seen the woman who will set for the Olympic team in 1992. Now, I mean, he had to think I was crazy. I hadn't seen Lori set at that point. But what I saw was a person who had the ability to immediately go on to the next play. And Lori, you mentioned to me that you felt that was a strength when you were with the Olympic team.
I really do, but like I tell that story a lot because I think it's really good for young players to hear that coaches notice things. And you noticed something in me that I wasn't even aware of. And I absolutely remember, and I think it was, I hit 12 in a row in the net and then hit the 13th one over. But I remember like having a little bit of a conversation about how I had impressed you. And I remember kind of going, what on earth? Like, how could he possibly be impressed by that? And it wasn't until later, I think when I was actually at Nebraska, that you said what impressed you the most was my composure. I didn't point fingers. I didn't blame. I didn't get frustrated. I just kept working. And I think that situation can teach young players in a lot of different ways. One would be that coaches do notice things. Like, they notice your attitude on the court. They notice how you behave with teammates and coaches and parents. They notice how hard do you shag after a drill is over? How hard are you working when people aren't looking at you? And so I think it's a good learning tool. And I use it a lot for that with my young athletes of, what kind of person are you? What are you showing about yourself? And so when you told me that it was my composure that impressed you, it showed me something about myself and something that was good and that I needed to continue and maintain that. And so I really prided myself on being able to be intense and competitive, but also composed at the same time.
I remember when Christy in 95, Fiona Nepo was a freshman, and after an early practice and everybody left the court, she stayed there and was racking balls and running all over the place and cleaning things up. And I said, Fiona, your parents must have done a really good job raising you. And she said, no, coach, I'm Samoan. And yeah, she was Samoan. But what I was noticing was her values, you know, that she took responsibility. She recognized it wasn't just the manager's responsibility. Kelly, can we teach mindset? I mean, you said you had confidence issues. Nobody would know that who saw you play, because it seemed like sometimes you could laugh things off. You had no problem if let's say that you underset a ball, you had no problem on the very next play dumping for a kill or going right on to the next play. How did you learn that?
Yeah, I definitely didn't always have that throughout my college career, but one of the biggest things that really helped me was kind of just mental training and mindfulness and meditation. And it kind of sounds a little out there when you think like, oh, meditation, is she just sitting there like crisscross applesauce thinking about volleyball? But it's way more than that. And it's kind of like yoga too, that mindset, being in the present moment. And I think that was something I learned to do really well, was to just focus on each rep as one individual rep, because you could set 60 balls in a match and every single situation is going to be different. So to beat yourself up over the set before is kind of crazy, because that won't ever happen again exactly that way. So kind of just learning to take everything one rep at a time really, really helped me. And then just being a setter and touching the ball the most, it's like if you eat yourself up over one thing and then you have to go touch it 60 more times, it's just, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage from the start. So for me, that mental training and mindfulness really helped. And we worked with Dr. Larry Woodman at this time when I first started playing a little bit more, and now with Brett Haskell. And so they were just amazing with their mindset training and mindfulness, and just helped to get you in that present moment.
Give me an example of a drill or a situation that they would work with you on.
So a lot of it was outside of the court, and we would go and meditate for 20 minutes after practice. And so they would either do like a guided meditation, or we would listen to what's called the Headspace app. So they have a bunch of different meditations there. But one of them I remember that really stuck with me was talking about flow state, which is kind of where you're in the zone. You don't have to think about what you're doing, and you don't care if you're not perfect. And so I remember we talked about imagining a game where you just felt like everything was going right. And then you were thinking about, what were you saying to yourself? What was the crowd like? How was your reaction with your teammates? And so you were just thinking about those specific things. And then you eventually try and learn how you can put yourself in that state. Because just as an athlete, sometimes you just have a great game and you're like, I don't know what happened. It was just a great game. And that's kind of like that flow state that you try to get in. So a lot of it was not even volleyball related and not even sport related too, just kind of getting yourself in that mindset to be in the present moment.
Right. 2017 in the last set against Penn State, at a critical point in the match, Nebraska, I believe, may have been up by 1 point in double digits. You missed a serve.
Mm-hmm.
You may not even remember it.
I think it was game point maybe, or somewhere around there towards the end.
It was just short of game point.
Yeah.
But I was more curious on what would happen on the next play, and you just moved right on.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a person in a leadership position, and rather than be embarrassed about it or think about it or sink your head, you were the same Kelly Hunter on the next play. I want to ask you a couple technical questions for coaches out there. Did you have a cue when you set the ball that if you knew if you did that, you would have a hittable ball? In other words, as you came off the net, was there something that you knew you needed to do each time that would allow you to set a hittable ball?
Yeah, that kind of changed for me throughout my career, because I remember in high school not really thinking too much about it, just kind of using athleticism, getting there. And but throughout my college career, it definitely changed. And then working with Tyler Hildebrand, our associate head coach now, we worked a lot on footwork and foot position, which I hadn't worked on in a very long time. So it was kind of interesting. And for me, we just kind of got my feet together a little bit more instead of this really dramatic left-right that would put me in kind of a compromised position. So towards the end of my career, this is what I remember the most, as being a cue where I knew if I didn't do this, it might not be great. And if I did it, it's probably going to be pretty good. But it's kind of just feet together and underneath the ball. So.
Good. Lori, Christy, anything along those lines?
I guess I feel like there were several things. One would probably be balance. And I feel like you can be balanced without being in the perfect position, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay, so maybe your feet aren't great. Maybe you're a little bit out of system. Your feet aren't great, but you can still maintain a level of balance where your finish is still going to be good.
And how do you maintain that balance? What has to happen?
I think part of it comes from natural athleticism, just being able for your body to recognize the situation that you're in and still be able to accommodate. So if my feet are a little out of position, then maybe my shoulders adjust to balance myself out a little bit, and then I'm still able to get my good finish. So I think finish is an important part in any good set.
Right, in any athletic movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking for those shoulders to come around, what happens is the hips slightly lower. That anytime we lower our hips, we gain balance. Christy, what was your cue?
Probably at finish or freeze as well. I think, in setting, there's a million different ways, body positions you're going to get into when you're setting, because it happens so fast. You can't take the ball the same way each time, even though that's ideal. But I think when I would get tentative, my release would kind of soften up, and my finish wouldn't be very good. So if I would kind of always go back to that, just finish or freeze my hands assertively, and the ball would kind of go where I'd want it to go. So I feel like for mine, it was a little bit of physical, but some mental kind of tied in with it.
You all coach setters now, and you were exceptional at the position, which gives you insight into the position. Can it make it frustrating to work with someone who wasn't as committed or as intent or as driven as you were in the position?
I think it can, although I don't know if I see it that much differently than any athlete I have. I feel like, I've kind of been through this. I know what it takes. And so if any athlete doesn't show that same kind of commitment, I think it's frustrating. But, I think I would guess we all probably hold our setters to a little higher standard than the other players on the team. So, but at the same time, I do think having played the position, I have probably, I don't know if empathy is the word, but I think I get how hard it is to play that position, how much pressure there is, how difficult it is. So I think I also kind of, I don't know, I think I just have a better understanding of it's really hard. You sometimes think I think maybe coaches who didn't play the position might think, well, how did you not see that block? How did you not know that player, that hitter was open? Why did you make that choice? And I think having played it, you understand it's not that easy. When that ball's zipping around so fast, it's not that easy to see what's open or, connect with your hitter. And so I guess I see both of sides. I think it can be frustrating, but also I think I understand a little bit how difficult that position is and have a really deep appreciation for it.
Yeah.
Well, Kelly and Christy are in, sorry. I was just going to say Kelly and Christy are in a little bit different situation than I am, because I mostly train younger setters. I don't have a club team right now that I'm coaching. And so I've got little 8th graders and 9th graders that are coming in and just new to the position. And so our stuff is all about feet and hands and finish and that type of thing. But to kind of jump onto what Christy was talking about, how, players will say, oh yeah, I saw the block move. And I'm like, really? You were 8 feet off the net. You saw the block move? And I think, one, you know, when coaches are trying to teach, hey, you need to see the block, see where they're going. I'm like, do you realize I'm trying to hear 5 people call their offensive play, and, you know, they each have 3 different options, and then I'm trying to get my feet to the ball and set the right option. Like, it is hard. It's a lot to think about and a lot to do. And so I think, like, for me, with what I try to teach is, hey, let's get you to the ball and get a good set.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is that I firmly believe that the wrong decision set confidently is better than the right decision set without confidence. And I don't want to take away from my setter's confidence. How does a coach create trust with a setter?
One of my favorite things about you is my freshman and sophomore years, I felt like you were kind of hard on me. And when I look back on it now, at the time, I was like, oh, you know, but at the time, I know that I needed to be tougher. Like, I wasn't very tough. I wasn't ready to take over the setting position. And I know now that you being hard on me and challenging me was really good for me. And then by my junior and senior years, it was almost like your molding was done, your creation was done. And so then you could just go, here you go. Okay, Lori, it's time. And then from that point, I felt like you were in my corner. Like, I knew that you were in my corner, that you never questioned what I wanted to have happen as a player and a setter for our team. And so I never questioned that. And that really helped me be confident in myself.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
We moved from coaching to collaborating. Christy,
Yes.
Insight into that.
Yeah, I think it starts with, you do have to have the knowledge, I think, as a coach. I think you can't, especially with setting, you can't fake that, like, understanding and knowing a position. So I think there's some trust gain with just working with a player and them trusting you know what you're talking about. I don't think you can fake that with setting. With maybe you can cheat out of that a little bit with other positions, but because of the decision making and the technical part of setting, I don't think you can fake that. And I also think, for me, a big thing is not second guessing them all the time. And by that, it's kind of what I referenced earlier, is I think it's so easy for coaches to say, like, well, why did you set that player? Couldn't you see the block was there? Or, you know, just thinking that, you know, you from the bench, you know, could have easily made a better decision. I think there's got to be some trust that the setter's making the decision they feel is right, that you've trained them to make decisions. You know, it's a lot on us to do that. And that you're not going to second guess them all the time, you know, that you trust that they're doing what they believe, and they've had the coaching from you, that you've done a good job of training them, and trust them now to make those decisions.
But I do want to make it clear, you wouldn't have had to be a setter to be a coach who trains setting if you work at it. If you go and watch elite coaches train setters, that it can be learned. I mean, I was never a setter. Kelly, you and John, I thought, had a very interesting relationship your last 3 years. In that, your communication level, you could tell him what was best for the team, and he could share with you the information you needed to get. How did, you know, he tells me you're the one who told him to sit down. I told him that for several years, but you had an impact. Tell us about that situation.
Yeah, I think being in a leadership role and being a setter, like, those two kind of go hand in hand, but any leader that you have on the court has to kind of be like the liaison between the players and the coach. And the biggest thing for me there is having a relationship outside of when you're in practice for 3 hours, because that's like kind of guaranteed, and that's your time where coaches are tough on you and they're expecting a lot from you. And then if you just don't see them until the next practice, you don't talk about anything, that could kind of create some strain, or just depending on the situation. But I think what was really cool about our relationship is that we were continually talking about the team, and we were always kind of just in constant communication and going out for coffee and random stuff like that. And I think a lot of stuff like that goes a long way, and not every coach does that stuff. But for me, that was kind of where our relationship shifted, was because we had a good relationship outside of just volleyball. And then I knew that there was that trust there both ways. And he trusted that if I brought up an issue with the team that I thought it really was impacting us, whether that would be positively or negatively, we talked about both. And so he trusted that. And then I trusted that obviously he would make good decisions for our team and put us in the best situations possible to go out and win matches and just run great practices, all that good stuff. So I think having the relationship outside of just the 3.5 hours where we're training made all the difference for me.
You know, and I had a chance to talk with John the other day, and what I admire about coaches is their ability to continue to grow. And I asked him about him training setters this year, and he said, no, Tyler is going to do that this year. And Tyler was a setter, and a coach who'd had the success that they had with you might think, no, that's always going to be my job. But he's willing to give that up because he thinks Tyler has a unique point of view, and it can help the team. And do players realize when a coach is growing, when a coach is taking chances, when a coach is, or can they realize when a coach is stuck?
I think players can realize, and with Coach Cook specifically, he builds a team around him in areas where, like, obviously he's not a nutritionist. So like we have a nutritionist who helps us, and he kind of builds that team to kind of fill in the gaps. Cause nowadays, not a lot of coaches do every single thing, like planning flights or just odds and ends, things like that, you know? So I think he's really good about building a team, and you can see when a coach is willing to learn and grow and kind of hear your perspective on things too. So I feel like players can pick up on that stuff.
You know, if we were going to say what you look for in a setter, you look for hands, feet, heart, head, mindset, decision-making. What's the deal breaker for you? Christy, when you're recruiting a setter, even though a setter can do a lot of things, what has to be there for them to be able to play at Iowa State?
I was thinking about that before we got on today, and I think for me it comes down to emotional consistency. You know, if I have a setter, and I've had some that just I felt like I wasn't quite sure day to day what to expect from them. They get in funks, they draw attention to themselves, they're a little bit, you know, high drama. For me, that's a deal breaker. I think there's a lot of other things I can deal with or work with, but if I don't have someone that's going to kind of come in and be the same most days, I think it's kind of wreaks havoc on the team.
Yeah. Lori, you mentioned when you left Nebraska and went to the national team, the former setters had all left and 4 of you were competing for the spot. And I asked you, how did you win it? And it isn't won in one day, it's won over weeks. But you told me that all of the setters were pretty good in system. You think you won the spot out of system by being able to get to the ball in a balanced position and set hittable balls. So I'm guessing if you were to answer that question, it would begin with the feet.
Well, I definitely agree with what Christy was talking about. If I see a player that one doesn't respect the game or respect her teammates or coaches, that would definitely be a deal breaker for me. I mean, you just can't get past that. But as far as technical skill, I mean, you're out of system so much that you have to have a setter that can play in system. You see so many great setters that are amazing when they're right at the net. And the game is played too often off the net and out of system. You have to be able to do things from there. So yeah, feet and balance, I feel like that's definitely a huge factor in what allowed me to have success internationally.
We talk about quickness. It isn't just quickness, it's how you arrive at the ball. And I would say that, Lori, that was certainly a strength of yours. I think I don't think Kathy Noth has spent a second of her life where she wasn't balanced. If it's going down steps or getting in a car or whatever. Kelly, what's the deal breaker for you? You're recruiting a setter to play at Nebraska. What would make you look in another direction?
Yeah, I completely agree with Lori and Christy. I feel like, especially being a setter, I feel like there's things that you can see. Like, do they make a bad pass look better than it is? And I feel like that's foot speed, kind of just reading the pass, stuff like that. So I guess not necessarily a deal breaker, but more so what I would look for would be like, do they make those tough passes look easy? And then to echo what Christy said, just are they high-fiving their teammates? Are they smiling? Are they pumping other people up? Because like we talked about, setters tend to be the leaders. And so they kind of have to be that more outspoken person and kind of just like a little hype man for all of their hitters. So that's kind of what I look for, is just like temperament, energy, and if they are kind of pumping up their teammates and being a good teammate as well.
How do you read a pass?
There's a lot that goes into it. I feel like it's very subtle. It's like milliseconds a little bit, and you can kind of see the passer's platform. You can see like where it's kind of hitting them. If it's coming up high, are they going to pull it off? So I think it's one of those things that you kind of just figure out as you go along. And I think if you try and kind of anticipate it, it's a little bit hard and you can get a little stuck. But I think it's first like reading the angle of the platform and then kind of seeing the trajectory and just making that one line right to the ball. So
can a coach teach that?
I think a coach can teach that. And that's something that I do work with setters on, because I feel like in today's game, not enough players track the ball to start with. But as a setter, you got to track the serve first, and then you got to transition your eyes to the passer. And I feel like too many setters look to where they're going. They just follow the serve, and then they don't let themselves gain the information that the passers could be giving them. And so being able to like transition your eyes from where's the ball going, you know where the ball is going because you've tracked it part of the way. So now see your passer, and like they learn to read the situation better when they transition their eyes to then focus on the passer instead of the ball.
And Christy and Laura, you may remember a drill we used to do where we'd put a chair at the net and we would have you just barely touching it as a ball was served. And the purpose of the drill was not to leave before you knew where the ball was going, because setters have a tendency to take a step and then have to make a correction because they were not patient enough to do that. I always believe that exceptional people have some insight into what their talent is, and talent is different than skill. Skill is something we can teach. So, for example, I think we can teach somebody to set a volleyball. We can improve somebody getting to the ball, but it's really based on talent. It's their innate quickness. Christy Johnson, what made you exceptional? What's your talent?
As a player,
yes,
I think my talent was maybe patience / perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I really, for some reason, I'm not really sure why, I really understood the game. I understood the decision-making part of setting. So I think for me, that was it.
I would add to that you, in terms of action, you understood the difference between emotion and passion. So you can afford to have a bundle of energy on the court if that's passionate energy. If it's emotion and things aren't going well, that person's going to be Eeyore, and you don't want Eeyore as your setter. So when you were asked your senior year to be a passionate player, so your teammates would not think about their own issues, you were capable of doing that. And I would guess no, I wouldn't guess. I know that you've carried that over into your coaching, that you're a passionate coach. Kelly, what's your talent?
I would say just kind of making hitters feel comfortable. And I kind of always was this way as a setter. Even if I knew I set a perfect ball and the hitter made an error, I would say, okay, I'll push it out a little bit more, or something along those lines. And so I think that's a very delicate balance of knowing, okay, like I do actually need to push it out, or like I need to pump them up in this moment. And I think that's something you kind of figure out as you set for a very long time and get to know those around you and that type of thing. But I think I was really good at kind of making the hitters know that I believed in them and I would help them and that they could trust me. And then I think along with that, just kind of having a calming effect on the court and still being energetic and competitive, but never reactive, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was a question Michaela Franklin had, the head coach at Clemson, how her setter had the question of, when you get a hitter in a funk, how do you get them out of that? And I think you answered that. I would also add to that you can't do that if you're not getting that from your coach. If you're spending energy trying to, be perfect with your coach, you're not going to have anything to give. Mm-hmm. Lori, your talent?
I think I was able to stay composed with a level of intensity. And I feel like my teammates always knew that I was working really hard for them.
Does a setter have to be the hardest working player on the team?
I think so. I think everybody should work hard, but absolutely. I think a setter should be guiding the work ethic.
Yeah, that's really well put. A setter needs to be efficient in how they're working. You don't need to be demonstrative about it.
Right.
But yeah. Another question here. Someone asked, where do you get your inspiration from? Christy, 16 years of being a head coach. Where do you go to get inspired?
Well, one, I think there's always like a pursuit to do something new, more, better, do something you haven't done before. We're always kind of chasing that. And there's always something left to be done. So I think a lot of it's just that drive. And I also think curiosity helps a lot. Every year I feel like just kind of organically, I stumble upon something I'm really curious about in volleyball or related to volleyball. And then I get really interested in that and I want to learn about it and I want to watch webinars on it and talk to coaches and, get into it and then try it with my team. So I think that inspires me to kind of keep growing, keep getting better, learn something new, learn something different. So yeah, it's a balance of both, I think.
Yeah, curiosity. I once said that I would never hire an assistant coach who wasn't curious. Kelly, who inspires you, or what are you inspired by?
Well, I think at a very young age, my parents and then Gwen, my high school coach, kind of instilled in me that I should want to be the best at whatever I'm doing. So even as a young kid, I was always, if we were playing a video game, I was like, I want to win. And I remember kind of a bratty moment of me, but with my cousins, I was like, okay, we're going to play horses. And then this is where you fall off the track and I win. Cause like, I just wanted to be the best. So yeah, not my best example, but I just think for me, that's kind of what it is, whether I'm like doing chores around the house, like I want to do it right. And I want to just, like I said, be the best at whatever it is I'm doing. And so I think that's kind of what motivates me, that perfectionism we talked about earlier.
Right. Lori?
Well, like I said before, I'm in a different situation as a coach than Kelly or Christy are. But my inspiration and motivation is when I'm working with a kid and we've been working on a specific thing and it's just not happening, and finally they get it. And you just go, yes, that's it. I think that's what keeps me going and inspires me, is when that kid just finally figures it out and the light bulb goes off. So that motivates me to just continue doing what I'm doing. And yeah.
So that brings you the most joy in sport and the most joy in coaching?
Right now, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's just seeing that success of a kid, that they just keep working and working, that it just hasn't happened yet. And then there it is.
There it is. Christy,
all of a sudden, yep.
Have you seen that this fall with a player? Have you seen somebody make a breakthrough?
Yeah. And I think, again, probably talk so much about the mental part of it, but I think when I see players kind of break through mentally, especially, I've seen lots of players kind of go into a funk where they're struggling with their confidence. Maybe they've had a few bad matches in a row and you could see them kind of trying to figure it out. And then when they come out of that, maybe they put in a little time off the court. You're talking to them about self-talk. You're working with them on their body language. You start to see some sort of change, and then you see the payoff. You see them kind of grow in their confidence. That to me is why we do what we do. I mean, to me, that's the most fun, because then you see, okay, they figured out how to work through that. Next time they're going to be able to do it a little better and come out of it a little quicker and grow as a person. To me, that's the fun of coaching, is to see that maturity.
Kelly, do you have a future in this? Is this an experiment for you, or are you beginning to see that maybe could be a profession for you?
Yeah, like we talked about earlier, I tend to kind of like live in the moment, and sometimes that can be a fault of mine. So I was like, oh, I want to go play now. Oh, I want to go back to Nebraska and help out now. So I've been very fortunate to have these great opportunities. And I've been with Nebraska this was kind of like the second year now, and on the coaching side, and I'm loving it and I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm seeing why I like coaching. And it's not necessarily like, oh, I could help this person hit this shot 80% of the time and like get a kill on it, whatever. It's kind of just those relationships and like those little moments every day in practice when, like, maybe if I wasn't at lifting and one of the girls is like, Kelly, where were you at lifting? I missed you. And just those little moments that make it really, really gratifying. And I'm just finding out how much fun it is being on the other side, and I've been really enjoying it.
I've been quoted as saying that setters are the shepherds of our game, and I have great affection and appreciation for you and your teammates and what you have given to the University of Nebraska in the sport. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, Terry, that was a great and fun interview. I really enjoyed just sitting in the background and listening to it. What's your leadership takeaway for this episode?
I think the leadership takeaway comes from what Christy and Lori, and Kelly all said, when asked the question, what do you look for in a setter, if you were recruiting a setter? And there are obvious physical talents, quickness and hands, vision, things like that. But they all centered in on mindset, somebody that can be both assertive, competitive, but composed. So you want somebody that naturally has the ability to be calm under fire. And as I look back on it, that's one characteristic of all the setters that I work with. They had the ability to, in the most difficult situations, game point in the most important matches, to help a team relax and play their best.
All right, great takeaway. Thank you, Coach Pettit. And just a quick reminder, go to terrypettit.com if you'd like to pick up one of Coach Pettit's books. And there is now a donate button on the website. So if you'd like to help support the podcast financially, you can click on there and give whatever makes your heart feel good about supporting Inside the Coaching Mind. I'm the producer, Dave Young, and we'll see you next time on Inside the Coaching Mind.